Okay, Richard, the recording has started. Take it away.
Great. Thank you for joining today's session, looking at middleware and basically inside the middleware black box, although today we are going to be focusing on DataPower. So in the middleware space, specifically the DataPower environment. This is what we're going to cover, a variety of topics, and like I say, we're going to spend most of our time on the DataPower. We're not going today covering the MQ or broker components. But again, they certainly tie in and are part of the middleware space. All right, just an overall picture of how middleware fits into the environment. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. And the key thing about the middleware is that it tends to sit in the middle, although in some cases that middle may be boundary type conditions, especially when you're dealing with DataPower, where it may be hosting a web service coming in from a third party or something of that nature. But the key is still glue that's tying different pieces together. The DataPower server itself is acting as a router or a transformer of messages, doing something to them to forward them on from the to the back end applications that need them, and vice versa. Okay. Really quickly, and again, just for the purposes of kind of setting the record straight, when we talk about transaction tracking, which is one of the more interesting areas in middleware, what we're talking about is something that's very similar to package tracking, in that you've got a bunch of disjoint things that it's kind of grown over time because of maybe mergers and acquisitions and new things that you've got, and you're not trying to tie everything together. Everybody's always worried about how fast it is and how much it costs and all those sort of things, and no matter how quickly you deliver on something, somebody always wants it quicker than that, right? And everybody's familiar with package tracking and the concepts of how it works and all of those details, right? But just like package tracking, different people care about different things, right? If you are the slideshow, let's see, is the screen advancing? Sorry, I just want to make sure everybody should be seeing a screen that says types of questions.
It is not advancing for me.
All right, hang on, let me see here. I just realized it. All right,
there it goes.
Now, how, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, when I moved the cursor off earlier, it seemed to have stopped it. Okay, so, right, so the questions that you might have are going to be different in package tracking. If you're the person waiting for a package, you have one type of question. If you're the person responsible for, delivering that package on time, you have a different question. If you're the owner of the package company, you have a different question. If you're somebody trying to figure out why a package didn't get delivered on the time, it was supposed to, you have a different view, right? And so just like that, when you're dealing with the middleware, different people are concerned about different things. They're concerned about, where did this particular transaction, where is it? Is it going to finish as according to our plan, right? If we have a commitment, a government commitment, for example, like with a Dodd-Frank compliance, or you have a, other type of compliance requirements, right? Am I going to meet those, right? If I'm going to miss my deadline and, I can't open the bank in the morning because I didn't process all my payments, that's a bad thing, right? It's not just about getting this done. It's about the business that ultimately backs that, right? So the end customer is really concerned about the business angle. But if you move inward in the middle, you look at it in the middleware manager, they're not necessarily concerned about any one message, although obviously they might be if it's a payment for, $10 million and it's stuck somewhere. They may need to be aware of that, right? But in general, they're much more concerned about the overall picture of, are transactions going through the system? Are there bottlenecks? Where are they coming from? And so on. And then, of course, technical teams are dealing with very, more problem-type things. They're dealing more with, where can we make improvements? What happened to a given payment? why are there so many messages sitting in this queue, or, you know, why isn't this flow processing the way that it's supposed to? Okay, so that's what we're really going to talk about and how we do that. And specifically, we're going to talk about it in the DataPower space and how it ties together. And again, as I mentioned earlier, middleware is so important to many of the legacy systems because it acts as the glue that ties all these different systems together. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to give you that insight to be able to tell you what's going on in that, and then, of course, to integrate with the APM environment so that, you know, that you can see that overall with other components as well. Okay? All right, so just a few words about NASTEL. We've been actually doing this for over 20 years, so we have a lot of experience in the middleware space, and that's where we focus, is just in middleware for the most part. Okay? All right. I'm not going to go into any details here, but just some of the different things that we provide in the middleware space. Okay, so as I say, today's session is focused more on the DataPower environment, and so we're going to look at that in some detail. A couple of just terminology things, and this is more for the people that maybe are, you know, obviously aren't working with DataPower on a day-to-day basis and are more interested in just how they get their arms around it. But, you know, terms that you'll hear me reference, so I just kind of want to set the ground for that before we, you know, dive into it. You know, some of the key things are something called a multi-protocol gateway. That is probably the most important aspect of DataPower because that is the piece that deals with like protocol conversion. So I mentioned you have a web service coming in and you need to get that into an MQQ. You know, that's something you're going to do, you know, through a multi-protocol gateway. Obviously, if that message is an HTTP type request or a web service request coming in, probably isn't what the application was expecting on the way out. So, of course, you've got transformation as well and all the other things that go with it, right? And then you have within there, you have policies. The policies are the things that ultimately fire depending on the different events that are going on or the different messages that are being processed. And then ultimately actions, which are the subset of those that determine which, you know, which rules fire and what they do as a result of that. So that's kind of the basis of DataPower, certainly not an in-depth webinar on DataPower. But the key is that you can take that, and this is a very simple flow. Basically, this is an example of a flow that just basically has two nodes. One that you know accepts it's a filter that comes in, so it makes or a matching rule that basically applies to what type of data should come in, and then a filter to determine of that, you know, which ones get forwarded on. So it's a very simple rule that just simply forwards messages, a subset of the total space. Okay? But now that we know that, we can start trying to actually learn information about the DataPower environment. So DataPower is, I'm sure most of you are aware, is an actual appliance that installs in most cases. I mean, there is a VM available, but most people today still run appliance in their production environment. It's hardened, you know, it's a hardened appliance, and it has metrics about its own operation. So it has, you know, batteries, it has CPUs, it has file systems, and so on. And so simply needing to know how well that DataPower is operating is something that people are concerned with. And again, going back to the different types of people, you know, and the different types of questions they ask, you know, this is certainly one of the questions that somebody who's responsible for managing the DataPower server itself would be interested in. Obviously, it doesn't affect necessarily the end consumer until it dies, of course. So it's more targeted at that, you know, at the administrative type person. But, you know, so again, there are different types of metrics that you would want to collect on that, and DataPower has a host of different metrics that it produces. So here's one that, again, everybody can just simply understand. It has memory, just like any other, you know, server. And, of course, needing to know how much free memory there is something that, you know, people will need to be concerned with, right? So, and again, that's just standard DataPower type metrics. Again, being exposed here for the purposes of just demonstration. Okay. It also has a set of notification type models that it produces. That in this case is when there are problems, right? So in this case, you can see here we've got an event saying that the operational state of a queue manager, actually you can see that here, QM, happened to be called QM, happened to not succeed. It did not fail or did not come up. And so, that's an example of an event coming out of the system. So that would be something that we would be wanting to track, right? So we can see that here, right? And again, similar one down here at the bottom, okay? So those are some of the examples of the statistical side of what's going on within DataPower, right? But as I started off saying, we're actually much more interested in the tracking side of what's going on within the DataPower server. So when we get into talking about tracking, our focus shifts a little bit from the overall picture to specific execution. So now we're interested about how long does a given processing rule, take? What can be done in order to see that, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually instrument these so we can see what's going on. And this is an example, sort of the end game of what we want. We want to know, what time did a given processing rule run within a given policy, right, on a given server, right? So you can see that here. And at what times did it process? So we can see here that this one took, roughly, there's a 6-minute gap here. 6-second gap here between 13:40:24 when this thing started and 13:40:30 when it ended. And of course, you can see up here that we did in fact say that the total was 0.4 seconds. So we can see that activity has gone on within the DataPower server. So now again, we could have a lot more events. We could have more, more details. This could have branched. It could have gone off to some other servers. We'll actually talk about that in a second when we talk about the integration. But the key is that we want to be able to see those events being generated by the flows within the broker or within the DataPower. So this is now a little bit more elaborate example. Showing the activity going on within a flow. Again, a single processing rule here. This is our processing rule 0 as it shows down here at the bottom. And then it goes through a number of different events. Again, these are typically application type events. But one of the nice things about DataPower is that it allows you to instrument those. Now, again, being a closed system, it prevents you from putting code yourself on the box. So you don't have a way of sort of hacking in, which is good, right? That's the whole point. But from a tracking perspective, the downside of that is it means there's no general purpose methods available currently to do that. And so we actually instrument the applications, and we do that by basically injecting 2 nodes. And this is done very efficiently. Basically, the 2 nodes are an XSLT transformation, a style sheet, which is what DataPower is very good at. Its job is to produce these. So this is, again, very, very efficient, very fast. And all it does is it basically takes the data out of the message that's pertinent and creates an event, a tracking event. And the reason we call it a tracking event is similar to the package tracking. If you think of when somebody delivers a package or it goes onto a truck, they scan it with a barcode reader, and that produces the tracking event that tells you what's going on. So this is the tracking event, and it basically tells us what's going on within that DataPower. So what rule is it? And again, most of this is boilerplate, nothing to do, but it creates that event so we can forward it on. And then we forward it on with an action to some destination. In this example, we're sending it to a queue, but we can send it to any DataPower destination that can listen. So we have something that's listening for this tracking event. And when that event comes in, we then read that, interpret it, and we collect, we collect that information, we collect the timings, and we store it as part of all of the rest of the data that's being collected. And I'll clarify that in a second as we go through here. So again, sort of now, kind of in summary, but just sort of talking about how we leverage this information, right? This allows you to have, obviously, your alerting, so you can see what's going on. You can be alerted to problems within the environment, as they happen. So if there's a problem where the DataPower is failing, then, obviously you want to be alerted to that. Picking up on the alerts, picking up on, the given different types of problem scenarios that you could have within the DataPower, being able to view that. Drilling down and seeing specific problems, within an environment so that you can look at it and, see what's going on within the DataPower. Again, are overall sort of things that you want to do. But then you also want to be able to take that tracking information that you're collecting and view that as well. So, how many of the transactions that are going through DataPower are meeting their SLA? How many of them are failing? What's the average processing time going through the DataPower server, and so on. And so those are all things that, again, that you would be interested in. And that goes beyond just the standard, health of the DataPower box now, right? And that's really the key, is we're looking at now the applications running on DataPower and their health. And, of course, we can view those in different ways. We can view them over time to see how long they're taking to execute. Again, like we saw before, we can drill into, into specific ones. This one starts getting into some of the discussion about the ability to actually go beyond just DataPower. So in this case, it actually has gone off to MQ, and we're actually seeing that we're getting a failure in an MQ environment. So came into DataPower but got pushed behind to an MQ queue, and when it reached the MQ queue, it in fact failed because the queue was full. So, being able to track those sort of problems are key. And then, of course, to go even further and go out into the Java applications and into the different components. And that's where the ability to integrate this with the tools like APM, let me skip through these. These are all just sort of summaries of things we've already talked about, just different examples. But getting back to this overall architecture picture, the middleware is just part of that environment, and so having a solution where you can integrate with other solutions and other technologies that are being processed becomes important. And so now then we want to be able to take that same information that we have and be able to actually integrate it into an APM environment. And so we can actually see the time being spent in DataPower as composed to the time being spent in the application server or in the back-end Kix environment, or, wherever it is. We want to be able to track that and see that picture. Similarly, of course, in APM, if there is a problem, you want to be able to see the statistics as well. So we can also integrate the statistics that I showed you into APM and present those as well within that environment, so that you get that visibility of both the operational state as well as the transactional state. And with that, I think I have come to the end of the prepared material, and we wanted to open it up for any questions or, any other discussion anyone had.
Thank you, Richard. For anybody who is not dialed into the call line directly, you can ask your questions in the Q&A box in the bottom right of the WebEx. If you don't see the box right now, in the upper right, you'll see a question mark icon. Just click on that, and the box will open for you. So far, we don't have any questions that have come in that I've seen. So I guess we'll just give everyone All right, here's our first question. What is required to get the DataPower data into APM?
Right. Okay, good question. Actually, yeah. So the integration is done through the APM APIs. Basically, we act as just another APM probe. So what's going to happen from a technology point of view is that we're going to take the information. We're going to, as I mentioned, we're going to collect it on DataPower, and then we forward it to a listener, and that listener is on some other server, right? So its job is to, to centralize. You could be listening for one or more DataPower servers, other things like MQ as well. It's going to collect that information, and it's basically going to translate it into a format that APM understands, and it's going to forward it on. And so it's going to, basically get published in through the APM API, and it's then going to get processed in like all of the rest of the data that is going into APM. So it's a very simple process, basically, of simply collecting the data and then forwarding it on to the APM server through the API. Now, one question you might have, and I think I saw one earlier, similar question, which is how do we actually then integrate that data, right? If its data is being collected in DataPower and then also being collected in, say, Java. So you have a DataPower front end that drives a Java application backend, or vice versa. You have a Java application backend that generates a web service that fires out to DataPower that then goes back into an MQ environment, right? How would we know to correlate those together? Well, one of the things that's done is that we actually associate those messages with a correlator. So there's a correlator that's common between the different environments. And as that comes into DataPower, that is one of the things that, when I mentioned we have that style sheet, one of the things that the style sheet does is it actually looks for that correlator, and if it finds it, it propagates that into the rest of the data. And so that way you get the full picture of how it flows from the from the front end to the back end to the middle to to wherever those environments are. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a couple other questions that have come in. One is this agent available today? Can you also speak to how this differs from the CA field pack for DataPower?
Okay. Not sure if anyone else wants to take that question. I certainly can. Right. So the two things. Yes, this is available today. The distinction is the field pack is more of a field developed solution targeting, specifically DataPower, and focuses more on the operational side. And as I said, our solution is targeted, at both the operations, which of course is important. That's certainly not saying it's not important, but getting that operational information in, as well as the transactional side. One other thing, and I didn't really talk about it too much, but you did notice that, when I was showing some of the screenshots, we can also pre-process some of that information ourselves within the NASTEL Autopilot environment. And when we do that, what we forward on to APM then is already sort of been analyzed. So we've done some, we can flag, for example, whether this value has, seen some anomalous behavior recently and those sort of things. So there's added value that the NASTEL solution brings into the solution as well.
Yeah, the second question that I saw was actually very similar.
Okay. All right. Well, I probably already answered that one.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Anything else?
Oh, hold on. Yeah, there's one in the chat box. Do we need to install or configure any CA APM file with DataPower?
Need to install. I'm not sure I understand the question.
All right.
Ask it again. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, it's do we need to install or configure any CA APM file with DataPower?
Right. So there's obviously on the back end side, there are some things to basically create the DataPower, rules and things within, APM and TeamCenter. Nothing on the DataPower server side. It's not something on the DataPower that, there's no CA things that are deployed or anything on DataPower, but there certainly are rules that have to be set up within APM to manage the information that we're sending.
All right, another question just came in. So is the Nastel agent an installed agent to the DP?
Right. So there's no installation on the DataPower solution of an agent. In fact, there's no DataPower or hardened devices. You can't install software on them. So basically all that's installed there are actually just these style sheets. The only thing that has to be there is the style sheet that basically defines what information needs to be collected. So it's just basically a configuration file, and that's it.
Are there any other questions for Richard?
Okay.
All right, I don't see any, so I guess we can wrap up for today. Richard, I thank you very much. And to our attendees, also thank you for coming today. I will be getting this replay posted out in the community later today, and we'll also make Richard's PowerPoint deck available to you as well. Have a great day, everybody.